Welcome, learners, to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a topic that's, well, both timely and pretty unsettling. How psychological operations, or PsyOps, are shaping our perception of reality. It's like a hidden war, right? Not fought with bullets, but with these really carefully crafted narratives, emotional triggers.
Exactly. And the aim really is designed to turn our own minds against us. That's what we're exploring.
We're going to unpack this idea of PsyOps, not just as, basic propaganda, but something different, a different type of warfare.
You could think of it as a kind of psychological Trojan horse. It's built to bypass our critical thinking. And as our sources suggest, it embeds these hostile narratives deep inside us.
Until we become their unwitting amplifiers. Is that the idea?
That's the core of it, yes. It's about mind recruitment, not just simple persuasion.
So our mission today is to pull back the curtain on this really intricate world of information warfare. We've got a stack of fascinating sources to draw from.
Yeah, including an analysis of Russia's PsyOps specifically, a deep dive into psychological vulnerabilities, why we might be susceptible.
And also a revealing transcript from a YouTube channel that, well, it found itself right in the middle of this whole battle.
So we'll look at how these operations work, maybe who's involved, and crucially, why we're all perhaps more susceptible than we'd like to think.
Okay, so let's start there. What are PsyOps, really? How do they actually differ from what we normally think of as just, propaganda?
Well, the key thing from these analyses is the goal. PsyOps aren't just trying to sell you an idea or a product. The explicit aim is to turn your own mind against you.
Against you. How does that work?
It's designed to bypass your logical defenses. It's much more insidious than just presenting biased information.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting, but maybe a bit disturbing. The method. Our sources say these operations hijack our empathy, our instincts.
They fabricate these heartbreaking human stories, or they mask Kremlin narratives as just alternative viewpoint, something plausible.
And the danger is, by the time these messages hit our emotional triggers, maybe anger, maybe sympathy, the hostile narrative is already inside, it's past the gate.
Exactly. And then you don't just repeat it passively, you become its loudest defender. You genuinely believe it and amplify it.
It's almost like your mind's been co-opted without you even noticing. Like those puppet strings you see in imagery about manipulation.
That's a good analogy. And the chilling part is that the real win for them isn't just controlling thought, it's recruiting minds.
Getting individuals to unknowingly push a foreign agenda, believing it's their own idea.
Precisely, turning you into a zealous advocate for a perspective that wasn't originally yours, and you don't even realize it's external. It's a fundamental shift in weaponizing information.
Okay, so this idea of being a sort of soldier in an information war, that brings us to a specific person mentioned in our sources, Konstantin Rozhkov.
Yes. His name comes up often linked with RT, the Russian state-affiliated media network.
And the claim in some of our source material is pretty stark. He's described not as an independent journalist, but as someone operating on a Kremlin budget, essentially a soldier in this info war.
Which immediately raises the question, okay, how does this actually play out? What are the real-world examples?
Well, the sources point to this banned YouTube channel called Russian Code. You heard of this?
I've read about it, yeah. It featured, what, dozens of Western families supposedly moving to Russia?
Under this traditional values program. And it wasn't just amateur stuff, right? It looked highly produced.
Right. And here's the connection. The production quality was apparently almost identical to Rozhkov's own work.
Which makes it feel less like coincidence and more like, well, potentially coordination.
And the traditional values program itself, launched by Putin in 2024, is described in the sources not just as policy, but as a weapon.
A weapon aimed at destabilizing the West, targeting audiences from so-called hostile countries.
Exactly. That language suggests a very clear strategic intent behind the content, not just documenting a trend, but actively promoting it for strategic reasons.
So the sources argue Rozhkov wasn't just covering this program.
He was part of executing it. That's the claim.
Yeah.
And apparently, according to the sources, Rozhkov himself even used the term warfare in one of his videos.
Wow. Like an open acknowledgement of the nature of the operation.
Almost seems that way, yes. Describing it as an information conflict he's involved in.
That's a really strong claim, calling him a soldier on a Kremlin budget.
Yep.
Do the sources offer his side of the story? Any counter-arguments or a different perspective from him?
They do, actually. And we'll definitely get to his direct response and his perspective later on. It's important to hear that, too.
Okay.
But first, understanding these claims is crucial to grasp the perceived threat and the scope of these alleged operations. His account, though, offers a very different view of his independence.
Got it. So if these kinds of operations are happening, targeting emotions, bypassing logic, what does that mean for us? For the average listener, it can feel like something that only affects, other people.
Yeah, people often think that, but the sources really dig into the psychological factors, the vulnerabilities that make all of us susceptible, often in ways we don't realize.
What kind of factors are we talking about?
Well, several key things emerge. One big one is a deep, pre-existing distrust of institutions.
Like governments, big corporations, the official media, even science.
Exactly. That distrust isn't just a feeling, it's like an open door for PsyOps. They thrive on suggesting the accepted truth is a lie, and their narrative is the real hidden truth.
And fill a vacuum they might even help create.
Precisely. And then there's binary thinking, that very human tendency to see the world in black and white, us versus them.
Good versus evil, elites versus the people, friends versus enemies, that kind of thing.
Yes. Many ideologies work that way, and PsyOps are incredibly skilled at crafting narratives that slot perfectly into that framework. Clear adversaries, a righteous our side. It clicks.
And emotions. You mentioned emotions earlier.
Huge role. These operations are specifically designed to hit strong, visceral emotions. Anger, fear, indignation, that powerful sense of injustice.
And when those emotions fire up,
rational thinking can take a back seat. It gets disabled, essentially, makes us much more open to manipulation, less likely to stop and critically evaluate. It's like a psychological judo move, using our own emotional weight against us.
And the online world plays a part too, right? Echo chambers, confirmation bias.
Absolutely. Especially within online communities. You get constant validation of your existing beliefs. PsyOps exploit this perfectly.
How so?
They craft narratives that align exactly with what the group already believes, so any contradictory information gets automatically dismissed, maybe even attacked.
While the PsyOp narrative spreads like wildfire and becomes the accepted truth within that bubble.
Exactly. And what's really crucial to remember here is that this isn't about how smart you are. It's not about intelligence.
The sources are clear on that.
Very clear. It's about leveraging psychological vulnerabilities and those pre-existing worldviews. And while, sure, some groups might be more prone due to these factors, nobody is truly immune.
Because these operations can be tailored.
Highly tailored. They can appeal to anyone's specific values, fears, weaknesses, or all potential targets, depending on the angle.
Okay, that paints a picture of the landscape of vulnerability. Let's bring it back to the specific case study now. Konstantin Rozhkov and the shutdown of his YouTube channel, Real Reporter.
Right. This happened recently. He had, 330,000 subscribers, millions of views. It was a significant platform.
Yeah, definitely not small. Yeah. And our sources include parts of an interview where he talks about this. How did he react?
He expressed, profound shock and devastation. He'd spent 3 years building it, apparently from scratch.
And it wasn't just a hobby, right? He mentions it was a business.
A monetized business, yes. He talked about getting sponsorships, which he pointed out is tough for anyone on YouTube, but especially doing it from Russia, dealing with financial hurdles just to get paid.
And he described the channel's content as having 3 lives. What did he mean by that?
Right. So initially he said he covered just life in Russia, what the sanctions actually meant on the ground, shops, gas stations, that kind of grassroots info.
Okay, sort of man on the street stuff.
Then phase 2, it shifted to focusing on foreigners moving to Russia, specifically Americans. And some of those videos apparently got millions of views.
That lines up with the Russian code channel theme we discussed earlier.
It does overlap, yes. And then more recently, starting in 2025, he began interviewing military experts, discussing modern warfare, but from what he called a Russian perspective, providing a Russian lens. That was the 3rd phase.
That shift is definitely interesting. Now, the people interviewing him, Allison Morrow and Bill Doris, they had their own experiences with platforms, didn't they?
They did. They mentioned YouTube removing literally thousands of channels labeled as Russian or Chinese propaganda. It's a widespread thing.
And Morrow, she identified as a free speech absolutist.
Yes, and she talked about her own channel being suppressed, even losing her job over interviews she did that challenged official narratives, particularly around COVID. So she has firsthand experience with platform censorship.
So how did Rozhkov respond directly to the accusation that his channel was propaganda?
He called it a lazy label, said people just throw it at anything they disagree with or simply don't like without needing facts or evidence anymore.
Just a way to shut down conversation.
That was his argument. He challenged critics. Be specific. What exactly is propaganda in my videos? A direct challenge to that broad label.
Okay. Now, there was a specific report mentioned, right? From the OCCRP.
Yes, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. They published what the interview source calls an anti-Russia hit piece.
And what did it claim about Rozhkov?
It claimed he received money and support from RT, implying that connection was why his channel should be seen as propaganda and, perhaps, why it was shut down.
And his response to that specific claim? Money from RT.
He explicitly stated there's zero evidence for it. Zero.
But he did work for RT previously.
He admitted that, yes. But he insisted he quit years ago, specifically to build his YouTube channel as his own independent business, a content creator.
So he sees articles like the OCCRP one as justification after the fact.
As red flags, he called them, ways to justify shutdowns without needing actual proof of wrongdoing on the platform. He argues it silences voices rather than engaging with the content itself.
And Bill Doris, the other interviewer, seemed to support Rozhkov on this.
He did. Doris said he didn't see how Rozhkov's early work, like covering the coldest places in Russia stuff, 60 Minutes, might do counts as propaganda.
He also mentioned something about Western companies in Russia.
Yeah, Doris brought up examples where companies supposedly left due to sanctions, but in reality just relabeled products and kept selling them via different routes. He argued, showing that reality isn't propaganda, it's just reporting what's happening.
So this really highlights that blurry line, doesn't it? Or at least the perceived blurry line between reporting, perspective, and outright propaganda, especially in today's charged climate.
Absolutely. It heavily depends on your starting point, your own perspective, how you interpret the intent behind the information.
This whole deep dive, it just reveals such a complex, often really murky world. If PsyOps are designed to bypass our critical thinking, to sort of rewire our minds, and if propaganda can just be a label thrown around, maybe without solid evidence, how do we, the listeners, navigate all this? It feels overwhelming.
It really does. And I think the main takeaway connecting all these pieces is that every piece of information, frankly, no matter where it comes from, needs that layer of critical thinking.
More than ever before.
Probably, yeah. This constant back and forth between stuff presented as on-the-ground reporting, then accusations of bias flying from all sides, plus platform censorship. It makes discerning truth incredibly challenging.
And it also brings up that uncomfortable question about selective censorship, doesn't it?
It certainly does. If some content gets labeled propaganda and vanishes, while other narratives, maybe narratives that serve a different national interest, are allowed to thrive.
What does that tell us about the overall landscape? Who controls the flow? Whose voices get amplified and whose get silenced?
It definitely makes you wonder about the bigger picture of information control, yeah.
So wrapping this up, what's the bottom line here? Today we've explored how these psychological operations can act like a modern Trojan horse.
Right, not just spreading propaganda in the old sense, but aiming to fundamentally rewire how we see reality.
We've looked at how they exploit our own psychological vulnerabilities and how blurred those lines can be between independent reporting and, well, targeted influence.
And I think this deep dive really just hammers home the importance of critical thinking, of questioning our own assumptions, especially in this age of just constant information overload.
Because the goal is to make us unwitting amplifiers.
Right.
Pulled by those unseen strings.
Exactly. And understanding the mechanisms, how it works, that's really the first crucial step in protecting our own minds, keeping our thinking independent.
So maybe the next time you come across a story online, maybe a really compelling human story or an alternative viewpoint, especially if it hits you hard emotionally.
Pause for a second.
Yeah, pause and ask, is this truly independent? Or could it be, possibly, a carefully placed thread in a much larger, unseen fabric of information warfare? Maybe even part of one of those two-faced narratives designed to manipulate.
Which leaves us with a pretty important final thought, doesn't it? In a world where information itself is increasingly treated as a weapon, how can each of us actually cultivate genuine digital resilience?
How do we maintain our intellectual autonomy?
Right. How do we make sure our minds truly remain our own?